Welcome to Survey Booker Sessions. Tune in to hear from people working in a range of industries and roles to provide you ideas that you can take away and use in your own business. I'm your host, Matt Nally, the founder and director of Survey Booker, which is the leading CRM and survey management system for surveyors. So on this week's episode, we have Nigel Lewis, who's the head of content at the Negotiator. So thanks for coming on today.
Pleasure. Nice to be with you here digitally.
Yeah, I believe you're somewhere very nice at the moment.
I am in I'm in France, so it's a bit hot.
Rub it in. It's been raining a lot here. Do you want to introduce yourself and what your role at the Negotiator is?
So as mentioned, Nigel Lewis, head of content at the Negotiator. I lead the editorial team that does the news for the website, and I am the editor nominally of the print magazine. And so we have a very busy days doing both.
Awesome. And the Negotiator's focused on sort of sales and lettings predominantly, is that right?
Yeah. So property management, sales, lettings, some planning, lots of politics, bit of gossip.
I have to say I'm signed up to it myself, so I get the the newsletters through each day, and I enjoy going through those. It's always interesting to see just keep an eye on what's going on in the market generally. I suppose with the Negotiator and so on, there are obviously a couple of other outlets within, I suppose, the estate agency world. How do you, I suppose, stand out in the market and differentiate yourself?
So we always set out to be more of a visual feast for readers. So we lead on pictures, probably more significantly than our competitors. We try and be less tabloid, I think it'd be fair to say. So we try and be the sort of CEO's material. But nevertheless, that doesn't mean that we'll report on some more scurrilous elements of the industry. And also, because we have a background originally as a magazine, a print magazine. So that's the way that the website went, which is a differentiator in this market.
Yes, I guess that's interesting because I know that you have the magazine coming out regularly. Is that something that you see a very different engagement with in terms of the how people interact with that versus sort of the general day-to-day online content?
Yeah, I mean, it is very different. I guess most people who subscribe to the magazine are getting it towards the end of the month. They are probably going to sit down with a cup of tea in a quiet moment, whereas the very competitive environment for online news is all published at midnight or very early in the morning and is consumed by probably 9:30, 10 o'clock by most people. Most of the traffic comes in that early time when people are on the train, I suspect, probably first in the quiet period before they start their daily work as a property industry sort of person. They're going to check the news and just see what's going on. Is there anything major happen that's going to affect their daily job? And that's a very different set from a magazine environment where you're looking for advice and you're looking for opinions and you're looking for people in the industry being interviewed. That's just a very different type of media.
Yeah, interesting. And I know you said you focus on sort of less tabloidy style writing and sort of CEO level. How does that affect how you position content? Then I suppose there are two different ways of writing. Well, I suppose more than two ways, but there are multiple ways of writing an article that you find gets
there are
different engagement.
There are indeed. No, there are indeed. And I think it's all about the imagining yourself in the role of the reader, particularly the online stuff. So you have to go what your target reader you're trying to get through your headline and your first paragraph, and you're going, how do I get to them? How do I get their attention, get them to read this article? So you're trying to get into their head and go, what does someone who's a branch manager, regional manager, CEO, chief executive, whatever, that sort of level, how do they think and how do they view what's going on in the industry? And then you have to model what you're writing around those assumptions. And they're assumptions born of meeting these people relatively regularly at industry bashes, and you ask them what they think of stuff. And you can see that they think very differently about the more strategic goings on in the industry than probably a junior negotiator who's more interested to know if junior negotiators like him have been caught drink driving.
Yeah.
It's a different sort of setup. But even if you were to cover a story like that, like a young estate agent caught drink driving, you're writing it from the perspective of the more senior person looking down on that and going, whereas some other media that we compete with, including the nationals to a certain extent, who also report on the stuff we do, they will also they tend to be a bit more tabloid about how they approach it, and they're more appealing they're just appealing to a slightly different audience within the industry. So that's you can't have all of us going for the same readers. We all have to differentiate a little bit.
Definitely. And I suppose one thing I'm interested in, and you may not want to comment on this, but is timing quite important? Because I notice sometimes the newsletter, when it comes out, changes from maybe an earlier time to sort of not late morning, but more start of office hours. Does that have quite an impact on engagement as well?
It is. That is. No, it's perfectly right. Comment on it. It is quite crucial. I think all of the different media who serve this industry experimented initially in the early days of digital with different timings, and it was trying lunchtime. So you're just trying to get the reader when they've got a spare moment.
Yeah.
So it was that day's news so far at lunchtime. Was it an evening wrap up? Is it an early morning breaking news scenario? And I think we've all settled for this fact that probably the sweet spot is sometime between 6 a.m. and around 8:30 a.m. is when most agents are either in traffic, on trains, sat at their breakfast table, in the office, sat at a boring meeting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the daily catch-up meetings. And but also, I do know one of the publishers of the other media, and he was, we had a chat about it once over a drink, and and he was sort of saying that for them it was all about trying to get people who are want to look like they're informed about the industry for the morning catch-up. Because if you go to most estate agents, you'll see it sort of around about 8 o'clock, 8:30, especially at Foxtons. I always remember Foxtons are famous for their early morning meetings. They'd all be stood there having a catch-up, like what's happened today, where are we with these sales, all that sort of stuff. But also, the manager will like to go, by the way, the government's just announced this, so we need to bear that in mind when you're talking to potential vendors. That sort of stuff. So that I think we've all settled for the fact that after much experimentation, we've settled on sort of that time frame.
And I'm guessing one other aspect that's important to establish your or maintain as well your position in the market is consistency with posting, because obviously the newsletters are every day. The magazine's monthly. Do you find whenever that slips, or maybe it doesn't slip because you're very established, but maybe earlier on, does that have quite an impact on then engagement the next time, because people are expecting something at a certain point? Or
that's really hard to tell, not because I'm being evasive, but because Google Analytics is incredibly opaque platform on which to work out where your traffic comes from. You can tell that a percentage of your readers are coming back, but you can't tell which ones, and you can't tell. So you could be having massive churn, but new readers coming back and some of them revisiting you. It's hard also because people tend to use their personal mobile phones to read our stuff, but also use the company phone and then also use the PC at work. So it's very hard to know what a real person is.
True.
And whether they've returned to see your content or not is the answer to that one. But certainly, probably one of the major key performance indicators for me is what percentage of our readers are returning. Because obviously, if we're rubbish, then not many of them are returning. So that you're very keen to see that at least 50% of your readers are coming back.
Yeah, I think that ties into a general, I suppose, KPI point, which is it's important to look at the right metrics, not the vanity metrics, in order to understand.
Yeah, and it's again, analytics is annoying, or whatever the new version of analytics is now called. I can't remember, but you know what I mean. It's very easy to claim massive reads, but you really have no idea whether they're your target audience or not. And that applies to anyone publishing anything, whether it's an estate agent publishing their own blog, or whether it's the negotiator trying to appeal to sales and letting agents. It's very hard because you don't know. The rule of thumb, I suppose, is to get the highest reads possible, because then you're hoping that amongst those you have the highest percentage of your target audience within that. But at the moment, Google doesn't let you know. I suspect they'll start charging us a lot of money one day for telling us that. But at the moment, you can't find out.
No, it's very interesting. You have to make some educated guesses, I suppose, within that.
It is very much about educated guess, and it's interesting because in the old days you had ABC with print magazines, and you knew exactly how many people read it, and it was
Mhm.
qualified and measured. But with online, that's all gone out the window.
That's interesting because you'd expect, ironically, well, I would expect it to be the other way around, where it's easier to track.
You
But
would.
actually, I can see why it isn't actually from what you said.
Yeah, because unless you go to a subscription model like the Times, Telegraph, what have you, no, FT, sorry, they've taken the very brave decision to go, well, we will qualify it because we've got 400,000 readers and we can say they're all Times readers. But in a very competitive market like ours, where everyone's free, you're a brave publisher to go down the route of
Yeah,
charging for your content. There's been lots of discussions about that. I know all the different platforms, and there's prime content, maybe the charge only for breaking news, all this sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, if your competitors are offering the same, more or less same service for free, it's very hard.
yeah, yeah. That's a very interesting point, and I imagine that's a whole topic on its own. I think
Yep.
I think one thing I was really interested to discuss with you today is we live in a world now where it's very easy for anyone to post content,
Yeah.
whether it's
Yeah.
video, written, whatever. Um, Ultimately, what makes a good news story? So when does something become newsworthy versus just noise?
Uh, I think the certainly what I was taught at college, which is still true today, thankfully, is that you have to publish content which is the most relevant to the target audience you're going for. And the generally speaking, you get fewer reads if your stories, and particularly headlines and intros, are not appealing to their day-to-day interests and worries.
Mm,
And this is why the Telegraph is very right-wing newspaper, the Times is sort of middle ground newspaper, Guardian is left-wing, because they have refined that down to a very clever art of appealing to the type of readership they want to attract to their newspaper, and it's sort of it applies rather to trade magazines like ours and websites like ours equally, which is you have to sit down and go, if you were a sales agent or branch manager, you have different interests in life. Sales agents are interested in what consumers probably think and therefore how much commission they'll make every week. Whereas a branch manager is much more worried about, I don't know, how much he pays his staff and talent retention and KPIs around how much their commission is going to be. But they have much wider interest than that. But it's that sort of thinking through that you have to do. And certainly the other consideration in this market is to add your own personality, which goes back to what we were saying at the beginning, that each media platform has its own particular feel about it, and that's how you write the headlines and the editorial line you take on stuff. So, and then you attract people who are interested in that sort of angle that you're taking, and that's where headlines probably online now are the most important thing ever. And whereas when I started
yeah,
out, on the Daily Mail, they weren't that important. They were more interested in you getting your intro right. Whereas because the headline's so visible online, um, the the whole clickbait thing is very, very important because people will make a snap decision on whether they click on the story based on your headline and nothing else. Whereas in the old days, you'd open a page and go, you probably ignore the headline to a certain extent and go to the first paragraph and go, is this story what I'm
mm,
interested in or what appeals to my prejudices? Um, and then off you go. Whereas no one reads first paragraphs any longer. So that's interesting.
yeah. So that must be quite tough because I suppose there's two things there now. I suppose one is the grabbing the attention because obviously people are so used to scrolling generally on different
Yeah,
apps. Um, but the other is a lot of people I think are generally because of the amount of stuff they're scrolling through are quite happy to take the headline as gospel and not go
yeah.
and see whether the clickbait headline actually is backed up by the content behind it.
Yeah, so I agree entirely with you. Therefore, you have to walk this sort of tightrope between being making the headline as appealing as possible in a crowded market without misleading the reader, who will get really annoyed if he or she or they arrive on your website and it's not quite what you were promising in the headline. But I mean, but obviously all the old journalistic rules still apply, which is getting the story first will get more clicks. So exclusivity and scoops and that sort of stuff. And also, I'm afraid, despite this is my favourite dinner party conversation with people, is that everyone goes, I'm so depressed by journalism. It's all it is, bad things happening to people, and you go because you get 4 times, 5 times, 6 times more clicks on any story. If it's a story about a big estate agency having won an award, you get X thousand clicks. But if you get if it's the same estate agency, it's been discovered they have a racism problem within their HR department, you'll get 10,000 clicks. You'll see what I mean. And I'm afraid that is true, because although people present at dinner parties as being loving, the positive in life, in reality, the vast majority of people click on stories about other human beings making mistakes.
Yeah, and
end of.
I agree with that, and that's consistent with every sort of type of news you read or watch, or that's what drives interest.
And these are rules you apply as you go along.